Thanks for being with us. I'm Blake Burman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. The president in the Netherlands with world leaders, all sorts of geopolitical importance. But did this sum it up right here?
Daddy has to sometimes use strong language to get stuff.
Strong. He did it very affectionate. Daddy, you're my daddy.
Why the NATO chief dropped that term around the president today. Plus, the defense from the commander-in-chief and the secretary of defense. Did the B-2 bombers totally obliterate a top Iranian site? We are showing the images to a lieutenant general tonight as the CIA is also now responding and as the president heads home. Lawmakers in his own party wrestling with this protests over the big, beautiful bill. Will it survive the president's deadline? Also tonight, democratic socialism. That's the new choice for New York Democrats. Is that where the party heads all across the country? We'll get into it. But first tonight here from the Hill, a statement abroad. Just days after sending B-2 bombers into Iran, the president meeting with world leaders and mixing it up with the world press. Our Kelly Meyer live at the White House tonight as the president is set to arrive later this evening. Kelly, hello, good evening.
Hey there, Blake. Yeah, President Trump getting ready to return here to the White House as the CIA tonight is citing new intelligence that says key Iranian nuclear facilities were destroyed and would take years to rebuild. That comes after a day of pushback from President Trump on a U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency report that claims Iran's nuclear program has been set back only a few months and Iran moved highly enriched uranium stocks before the strikes.
We think we hit them so hard and so fast they didn't get to move. And if you knew about that material, it's very hard and very dangerous to move. We think it's covered with granite, concrete, and steel.
And President Trump went on to say that the Iranian nuclear sites attacked are so obliterated that he doesn't think it is necessary to sign a nuclear agreement when the U.S. talks with Iran next week. Take a listen to this.
We're going to talk to them next week with Iran. We may sign an agreement. I don't know. To me, I don't think it's that necessary. I mean, they had a war, they fought. Now they're going back to their world. I don't care if I have an agreement or not.
Now, the Trump administration isn't committing to declassifying the preliminary intelligence report or that new intelligence they mentioned. And so that could potentially prove the strikes were destroyed or not destroying those sites. But we're likely going to hear more in defense of the military's mission in Iran tomorrow when, for the second time this week, Blake, Defense Secretary Hegseth is going to brief the media tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Eastern. Blake.
All right, our Kelly Meyer live tonight on the North Lawn. Kelly, thank you. The threats abroad, particularly from Iran, leading to a crackdown here at home. 11 illegal immigrants from Iran are under arrest for alleged crimes, including assault, various drug crimes, child abuse as well. The Department of Homeland Security says 2 were previously part of Iran's military, while 1 was a suspected terrorist. Up on the Hill today, the Attorney General Pam Bondi testifying before the Senate. Our Joe Khalil tonight on what she had to say, as there are questions tonight about sleeper cells. Joe?
Yeah, Iran was obviously a big theme in that hearing today, Blake. I can tell you the biggest concern both inside the room and senators outside the room is that at the exact same time that Homeland Security is alerting all of these governors across the states to make sure they're aware of potential terrorist activity there, you've also got the FBI that has moved hundreds of its agents away from counterterrorism and over to immigration enforcement. So several senators were concerned that perhaps there needs to be a shift back on both sides of the aisle. And take a listen to what Senator Lindsey Graham said, asking questions of the Attorney General today.
They have sleeper cells, we think, here?
We have thus far arrested 1,500 illegal Iranians in our country. That is something that I would like to talk about in a classified setting. So but yes, have they invaded our country? Yeah. Absolutely.
And Blake, President Trump's proposed budget actually cuts 7% from the DOJ's budget, some $2.5 billion. I am told by Republican and Democratic senators that is likely to change when Congress gets its hands on the process.
All right, our Joe Khalil live tonight up on Capitol Hill. Joe, thank you. So as you heard there from both Joe and Kelly, Iran front and center today as part of the conversation. As President Trump was overseas for the NATO summit, the president held his typical meeting. You see it there with the head of NATO. But with the backdrop here, one comment in particular, anything but usual.
They've had a big fight, like two kids in a schoolyard. You know, they fight like hell. You can't stop them. Let them fight for about 2-3 minutes. Then it's easy to stop them.
And then Daddy has to sometimes use strong language to
You have to use strong language.
You hear the head of NATO there saying that Daddy has to jump in. At the end of his press conference with international media, the president then later asked if he regards NATO allies as children.
He likes me. I think he likes me. If he doesn't, I'll let you know. I'll come back and I'll hit him hard, okay? No? He did it very affectionate. Daddy, you're my daddy.
The NATO Secretary General now clarifying his comments, saying it was more so an analogy. Joining me now, Mick Mulvaney, former Trump White House Chief of Staff, NewsNation contributor, Chris Steyerwalt, host of The Hill Sunday, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello, Burman.
Thanks for being here. These were the two guys I wanted to start with this evening, given all that is going on. Mick, I remember when Donald Trump went to NATO, and Chris, you remember this as well, the first go-around. It was a lot different, felt pretty chummy there to the fact that you had the head of NATO saying, you know, dropping the whole daddy analogy. And I note that it comes 72 hours basically after he sent B-2 bombers into Iran. What's the vibe that you picked up on?
I don't pick up on the same vibe that everybody is, that somehow they're being obsequious by calling him daddy. That was an analogy. Trump said sometimes you got two kids in the playground. That's the analogy. I think the explanation that the guy put out is completely legitimate. So I put that aside. I don't pay much attention to it. But if your point is, are they treating him differently generally than they did 8 years ago? Yeah, I think 8 years ago, everybody was still sort of in shock that Donald Trump had won the election. Now I think they realize that, you know, he's one going away here in 2024. He's a legitimate president. They got to have to deal with him. And listen, even as much as they hated him 8 years ago when he said, you got to spend more money, now they know he was right. So there's certain understanding.
Bringing it from defense spending from 2% to 5%. Do they essentially, Chris, look at this guy as someone in his second term and seeing what's happened and believe that this is someone who is not messing around?
Well, certainly Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump was right. He warned Europe that it had to do more for its defense, and then Vladimir Putin proved it. Proved that Europe would have to do a great deal more for its defense. The world is a changed place from before. But I keyed in on the comments that Donald Trump made where he said, I like these people. I don't think that they're ripping us off. I think that they love their countries very much. And he sounded like an internationalist. He finished. It was a really remarkable thing for him to say. Yeah. And I don't want to call it a new Trump doctrine because his attitude may change tomorrow. But here's what we know about American presidents. When you act in big ways internationally, when you are a big-time interventionalist internationally, you like the power. We've seen from Woodrow Wilson to Bill Clinton to all kinds of people who are going to stay out. Right? Donald Trump did that. What do you think he heard from those NATO leaders when he got there? Thank you. Thank you for bombing Iran. We're so glad that you're here. We're so glad that you're back. And then Donald Trump says, oh, you don't hate me. You like me. You just want me to blow stuff up. You just want me to do the thing that I can do. And I think the problem for Republicans domestically is they arranged themselves around an idea that Donald Trump said and Democrats exaggerated, which is Donald Trump's an isolationist. The Donald Trump I saw today was not an isolationist. He was a guy who was like, NATO's cool, I'm cool, they like me, I like
That's what I'm getting at here with the tone shift. And you talk about blowing stuff up, right? There's the question about, as the president is abroad, how damaged is Fordow or not, right? Was it only set back the Iranian nuclear program a few months, or as John Radcliffe, the director of the CIA, came out today and basically said multiple years. And Donald Trump brought Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, up to the podium at one point today, and he said this.
All of the evidence of what was just bombed by 12 30,000-pound bombs is buried under a mountain, devastated and obliterated. So if you want to make an assessment of what happened at Fordow, you better get a big shovel and go really deep, because Iran's nuclear program is obliterated.
Donald Trump saw that, Mick, and just announced that Pete Hegseth is going to be going before the media at 8 a.m. at the Pentagon tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
What did he take away from Hegseth today to put him at the Pentagon briefing room podium tomorrow morning?
That the controversy of Signalgate is behind Pete Hegseth at this point. We talked about this 6 weeks ago when it first broke, that Pete needed to keep his head down, that Trump didn't like folks who bring sort of scandal into the administration. But he did a nice job on selling the administration line.
Had a good parade.
They had a decent parade. I liked it. But I think that Hegseth is sort of now back in good graces with the president.
Only Washington could have an argument as stupid as the current argument about, is it obliterated?
Yes.
Is it not? Is it medium obliterated? Is it mild to medium obliterated? It's the stupidest kind of Washington argument. We don't know. We do not know what the long-term consequences of these strikes will be. We do not know what Iran will do in the long. Nobody knows. Right. And when you're doing foreign policy, I cannot stress it enough. It is not choices between good and bad. It is between bad and less bad. What is the least bad option? That's how foreign policy works. This was a choice that Donald Trump made. It may prove to be great, may prove to be not great, but the idea that somehow today in Washington, D.C., that the difference between the word obliterated or limited is material or important or solvable is a Washington
And again,
stupidity.
we're going to know relatively soon. As part of peace discussions, either the Israelis are going in invited or uninvited to see what the lay of the land is. We're going to know. So you're right. Only Washington could make this into a controversy.
So let me leave you with this. The president right now is aboard Air Force One. And as you know, when these international trips happen and you fly 7-8 hours, whatever it is, he's up there on Air Force One.
Tweeting.
He's tweeting, watching television, seeing the coverage, seeing how it all's playing out, how it's all playing out, and reacting. Right? The president's about to return to the White House next hour, Mick. What is the first thing that Trump does tonight, you think, when he gets back to the White House as he processes what's happened here over the last 48 hours?
He'll go back to work. I mean, absolutely will. Again, the time change is not going to affect him. The man doesn't sleep anyway. So he'll go back to work. The rest of the team will be destroyed because normal human beings can't take that. But he'll try to figure out if there's any update on the current scandal of the day, which is whether or not there was full disclosure.
I bet.
How do you think he's feeling tonight?
He's feeling like he wants to talk about New York City. I bet.
Well, he was posting about that aboard Air Force One.
I'm feeling like that's the story of the day.
And we got one big beautiful bill to come back to too. So he's got plenty on his plate.
Well, he doesn't want to talk about that. I think he wants to talk about this.
No, he's got a bunch of senators coming over to dinner tomorrow night to try
and then they're going to try to have a rally, and if they're going to pass this thing by the 4th of July, he's going to have to spend all of his time between now and then basically crafting a deal, selling.
These two gentlemen, later in the show, Mick Mulvaney, Chris Steyerwalt, thank you guys, appreciate it. Still to come here on the Hill. The president doubles down on that very saying that we were just talking about.
You can't get into the tunnels. They just put that over. That just came out. They can't, there's no way you can even get down. The whole thing is collapsed in a disaster.
The president says the B-2 bombers did their job. Some reports suggesting otherwise. We are showing these images to a lieutenant general on the other side, asking him what he sees. And as the president deals with the Middle East, he's returning to a whole other set of issues. Here's what we're going to do tonight. A Democrat, a Republican, as the president lands. What are they watching? We're going to ask them. And a millennial socialist. Is that now the new face of the Democratic Party, or one of them? When the Hill returns, I'm Blake Burman. Thanks for being with us tonight. I'm back on the other side of the break in 4 minutes. See you then.
I got a call that the pilots and the people on the plane were devastated because they were trying to minimize the attack. And they all said it was hit. But we don't think it was really maybe hit that badly. And they were devastated. They put their lives on the line.
President Trump earlier today at the NATO summit addressing the reports doubting the success of recent U.S. airstrikes on Iran's Fordow nuclear facility. Now, the White House says the B-2 bombers obliterated, that's the phrase that they're using, Iran's nuclear program. But a leaked preliminary intelligence assessment suggests only limited impact. The Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says the FBI is now investigating that leak. He also described the devastation this way.
It was devastation underneath Fordow. And the amount of munitions, 6 per location, any assessment that tells you it was something otherwise is speculating with other motives. And we know that because when you actually look at the report, by the way, it was a top secret report, it was preliminary, it was low confidence.
Just a little while ago, we heard from the director of the CIA, John Ratcliffe. He released this statement. It says in part, quote, "The CIA can confirm that a body of credible intelligence indicates Iran's nuclear program has been severely damaged by the recent targeted strikes. This includes new intelligence from a historically reliable and accurate source and method that several key Iranian nuclear facilities were destroyed and would have to be rebuilt over the course of years." With us now, once again, here on the Hill, the retired Air Force Lieutenant General Richard Newton, NewsNation senior national security contributor. Hello, sir. Thanks for being with us tonight. Once again, always nice to see you. So I want to show you and our audience really Fordow. Let's put that image up on the screen because, General, it shows sort of some of, I guess, what we know. And here it is. So, Frank, come on in, because I want to show this circle here. You see 3 craters, right? 1, 2, and 3. And then down here, you see this circle and 3 more craters. And then this gray dust is believed to be sort of the dust, the concrete from the blast underneath. So when you look at that, and I know that's not everything or even close to it, but when you look at that, what do you see, sir?
What I see are 6 designated aim points where you had those bunker busters, first time used in combat on a direct hit on Fordow. Fordow, by the way, is the most heavily defended, heavily fortified target, certainly within the nuclear weapons complex in Iran, and probably one of the toughest targets in the world. We've been studying this for years, even back in the day when I was, flying jets and so forth. But nonetheless, this whole idea of trying to determine, is it whatever the adjective we want to use.
Right.
I think you go back to what CIA Director John Ratcliffe said, from the CIA standpoint, it is severely damaged. And we have to wait a number of days and really maybe even weeks, Blake, before we really understand clearly what the BDA tells us.
Here's what I picked up on, and I'm glad you mentioned the CIA Director. He talked about years and a body of credible intelligence. What did you take away from that?
Well, what he's talking about in terms of the years, it's not just a matter of months where they can probably get back in the nuclear weapons development business. I think in the whole body of work that we've done, not only with the B-2 strikes, but also the Tomahawk land attack missiles that went after Isfahan on Saturday night, I think you have to look at that from that standpoint, collectively also the other 9 or 10 nuclear weapon sites that he's really gone after in their marvelous air campaign. The other aspect of this, we're talking one leaked low-level memo from the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is an extraordinary organization. But the intelligence community is made up of several intelligence organizations. We also rely on our friends and allies, in this case, the Israelis will want to know that. Real quick here.
You think that's the body of credible intelligence? I mean, that's the word for, the Israeli intelligence, or the phrase?
Absolutely. You've got Mossad, but really where you're going to get your battle damage assessment is from overhead satellites.
Okay.
You're going to get it from manned aircraft flying over the target. You're also going to get it from boots on the ground through intelligence, such as Mossad and maybe Israeli special forces and so forth. So that's really how we're going to put together this battle damage assessment and really get an understanding of what we've got here.
Let me leave you with this. We see you in your nice suit and tie, sir, and in your home there. We did a little bit of homework because you used to fly, as I understand it, B-2s. Show the picture. This is Lieutenant General Newton. It's an old picture of him with the family. Where is it? There it is. Look at that. There you go. Way back in the day. But here's the reason why I bring it up, and it's not to have a little fun with you. It's because the president, sir, has been making this argument as it relates to the pilots. And I want to play it for you and then get your reaction. He's basically, we don't have the soundbite, but he basically said, you know what, we're degrading the pilots by even having this conversation. How do you feel?
Well, that's a photo from the mid-'90s or so. I was the first commander of the B-2 Stealth Squadron. Those are our 2 daughters, Elizabeth and Addie, after a very important sortie I flew. First off, I think what the pilots are doing is they're focusing on the next mission. Certainly, they're going over their battle damage. They're going over after, they're doing a sortie debrief extensively, from intelligence in terms of launch, mission, and so forth. But what they're focused on is flying and fighting and going after the next target, should they be called upon to do so. It's a marvelous organization. Another point I'll bring, it's not just the aviators, the crew members, it's the maintenance folks, it's the weapons folks, it's the intel folks. It's a wonderful team and really a wonderful thing to watch and be part of.
All right, we'll leave it there. Pictures and all. He is Lieutenant General Richard Newton with us tonight here on the Hill. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it as always.
Thank you, Blake.
Of course, you got to catch you next time. Still much more ahead. Here tonight on the Hill, that is not a picture, that is a live look over at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. The president's set to return soon. And when he does, he's got a host of issues before him. That's on the other side. And are we seeing a changing of the guard? What on earth happened in the Big Apple last night? And what, if anything, does that mean for the Democratic Party? Stay with us. 6:30 here on the East Coast, Washington as well. Welcome back. I'm Blake Burman. Live look at the White House. In a little while now, about 45 minutes or so, the president expected to be back from his trip abroad where he attended the NATO summit. The president returning to the U.S. with a bunch of issues before him. Calls for more evidence of what the administration is calling, quote, total obliteration when it comes to Iran's nuclear facilities. And within the past hour, the president posted this, saying that his defense secretary and military representatives will hold a news conference 8 a.m. in the morning to, quote, fight for the dignity of our great American pilots, the president says, as there are questions about what may or may not have been destroyed there in Iran. Meantime, over up on Capitol Hill, the Senate is still ironing out details of the president's big, beautiful bill. There's a chance lawmakers will have to stick around and work on the legislation over the July 4th holiday as the president wants to enact his agenda. He has a message for Congress. No one goes on vacation until that passes. Here's what we're going to do tonight here on the Hill. Take you to both sides of the aisle. The Democratic Congressman, John Garman. Hello, sir. Standing by for us. We'll get to you in a moment. But first, to the Republican from Florida, Mike Herodopoulos, with me here in studio. Congressman, nice to see you as always.
Great to see you, Blake.
Appreciate it. So let's start with the big story abroad overseas in Iran. The CIA director, John Radcliffe, says that they are going to make that initial assessment available at some point. This is an administration that talks about transparency. When should they make that assessment available for the American people?
Well, I think sooner the better, no doubt about it. They want to assess, get the answer right. Measure twice, cut once, so to speak, get it right. The good news is my entire life I've heard about Iran wreaking havoc in the Middle East, injuring so many Americans, killing so many Americans. We finally said enough is enough. The definition of stupid is doing the same thing over and over again. We said, no way, we're going to knock out their capabilities, and it worked.
Should they get that to the American people? Obviously, this is top secret, so there's redactions. But should they bring that within days, within weeks, within months? How quickly?
I think sooner the better. Again,
but what is that?
To me, I'd love to see it tomorrow. Let's put it that way. I think that the president has taken decisive action, which needed to be done, because our number one ally, that being Israel, has been under attack for so many years by 7 fronts, all funded by Iran. The reason why we have all these bases in the Middle East is because of Iran. We said enough is enough. This is a terrorist regime hiding under the idea of being a nation. They have been exposed to the weak country they are. The Israelis control the air, and of course we put the final coup de grace into this military structure.
Some new polling out shows that only 42% of the American public supports this. You see the sort of split among Democrats and Republicans that you get, but among independents, only 35% support this. Does the president need to? Does he need to make a case for this going forward?
I think he will. I mean, you saw the reaction today at NATO. They all hailed him as a hero because he knows and they know the chaos that Iran has created in that region. And when you take away that nuclear play, now they're weak, and the Israelis showed just how weak they are. Wouldn't it be nice to have a settled Middle East for the first time in our lifetime? That would be a big deal, and I'm excited about it. And I think when the president tells the whole story, you'll see those poll numbers move. But in regards to the polls, it was the right thing to do.
So as he heads back here, the thing that he wants done is your party, your side of the aisle, to get the one big, beautiful bill done. 4th of July is next Friday, as we know, and he wants it done by then. There's a real question, though, Congressman, on the changes that the Senate makes. When they send it over to the House, are y'all just going to accept it and say, yep, all that looks good, it's okay, time to go on break?
No, we're going to see what they send back. Of course, Mike Johnson, our speaker, has been remarkable getting this to this point. And we want to make sure we have a solid tax policy, reform broken systems like Medicaid so the most vulnerable are taken care of. But I think this is a two-way street. And John Thune has been, I think, an honest actor in this. The speaker told us that today.
Do you trust him, or do you think he's going to try to jam you guys?
Well, look, this is trust but verify. It's usually the message of the day, and the president has been incredibly engaged, like no ever. And I'm confident that we're going to come out with a thing that makes both sides not happy or sad. It's going to be a good old-fashioned Washington compromise with the president leading the charge.
Is there something that would be too far for you?
Well, the only thing I didn't want in there, I did not want a tax increase. And there's not going to be a tax increase in this. That's what I was most focused on. And I want a stable tax policy so business owners and individuals know what their tax rate will be so they can move on economically.
All right, we'll leave it there. Mike Herodopoulos is a Republican from the state of Florida. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Blake. Great to see you.
It. All right, so I told you other side of the aisle now as the president minced no words at his NATO presser earlier today, asserting that the strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities were a complete success. And today he doubled down on that claim.
The site is obliterated, and we think everything nuclear is down there. They didn't take it out.
Here now, as I mentioned, John Garman, member of the House Armed Services Committee. He is a Democrat from California. Congressman, thanks for being with us. You just heard the other side there. The administration is confident that the job was done by the military and by those fighter pilots. Are you confident?
Well, we've heard reports, preliminary, that it was not a complete obliteration, probably a temporary obliteration, but not complete. The after-battle action report has yet to be done, and we need to be patient here. It would be wonderful if, in fact, Iran was not able to reconstitute its nuclear program. However, there's 900 pounds of highly enriched uranium that has not been found, and that is what will be used should Iran decide to build a nuclear bomb.
Do you
that
take
has
this?
To be dealt with. We don't know what damage there was deep in the mountains, but those after battle reports will be coming in. The president jumped to a conclusion immediately, even before the planes had returned, that it was a complete obliteration.
Do you take the CIA director, though, John Ratcliffe, at his words? Because he says that it set it back years.
Well, we do not know, and nobody knows what actually happened deep inside the mountain at Fordow or at Isfahan. That is to be determined in the future. It would be wonderful if, in fact, the total system was obliterated. But there's evidence now and continuing discussion about maybe it was just temporary, maybe it was just on the surface and it didn't go deep into the mountain. We don't know, but we will find out. The next step out ahead of us is we should engage Iran in a new nuclear deal.
What do you mean by that? What does that look like?
Trump, well, we know we have a model that was in place that Obama put in place. Trump just put that aside. That first one had been negotiated by China, Russia, and the Europeans, as well as the United States, and it was working. It wasn't everything that was necessary, but this happened to be the year when it would be updated. We need to go back to that. We did not eliminate the individuals that know how to increase the uranium from 20% to 60% or to 90%, that know how to make a bomb. Those individuals are still there in Iran. So what we have to do is to get a new negotiation in place, use whatever success we have, and recognize along the way that we had an extraordinary military that was able to pull off a very important use of the bunker buster bombs. And our congratulations and admiration needs to go out to each every one of those, not only the pilots, but the rest of the crew that made all of that happen. Going forward, let's get the information. And then let's go back to the negotiating table, which President Trump was at before this bunker buster episode and then continue forward. Under no circumstances should Iran ever get a nuclear weapon.
Yeah, everyone.
If that takes military action, so be it. But it was working with a negotiation. So that's the suggestion I have in place.
John Garman, we wanted you to hear from both sides of the aisle. Democrat from California, just heard from a Republican from Florida with us tonight here on the Hill. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You got it. Still to come tonight. A political stunner for some in the race for New York City mayor.
If this campaign has demonstrated anything to the world, it is that our dreams can become reality.
So what happens next? You know, we focus on New York City, obviously the country's biggest city, and what happened last night, but does this go well beyond? What does the Democratic Party do now? President Trump weighing in tonight aboard Air Force One. Other side of the break.
Bill O'Reilly on Cuomo.
What are you talking about? Here's what I'm talking about, Cuomo.
America's favorite sparring duo with TV's liveliest, most honest debate.
I just tell you the truth backed up by facts.
Tonight at 8, 7 Central, only on NewsNation.
Stanley.
I will be your Democratic nominee for the mayor of New York City.
A stunner, to some at least in the political world, as the 33-year-old assemblyman and self-proclaimed Democratic socialist, Zohran Mamdani, projected to win the Democratic nomination for the New York City mayor over the 67-year-old former governor, Andrew Cuomo, who has a pedigree of New York political royalty. Now, despite trailing in several, basically every of the polls leading up to yesterday's vote, Mamdani would get about 43%, 7 points higher to Cuomo. But this is not really the tale of what many in the sort of older wing of the Democratic Party are talking about, not necessarily this race, rather what comes next. Cuomo was backed by party giants, Bill Clinton, Michael Bloomberg, for example. Mamdani supported by Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, for example. And when you look at the platforms that Mamdani ran on, and it still talks about and runs on, here's just some of it. A rent freeze for all rent-stabilized tenants, city-owned grocery stores, fare-free bus lines, a $30 minimum wage in the coming years, and his refusal to condemn the term globalize the intifada when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Full panel here with me now. Mick Mulaney, NewsNation contributor, former Trump White House chief of staff. Jasmine Wright, White House correspondent for the outlet Notice and co-author of their morning newsletter. Chris Direwalt, host of The Hill Sunday, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. And Dan Cannon, former Battleground States Director for the Biden and Harris campaigns. Hello to you all.
Hey, Blake.
Nice to have you in. I'm going to start with this guy right here for good reason, because you ran presidential campaigns for Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Mike Bloomberg. You see this as what?
Well, look, I'll clue you in on something, Blake. Okay. The voters in Manhattan and the 5 boroughs do not represent the voters across the battleground states or House districts in this country.
All right.
And Manhattan and Milwaukee or Muskegon, Michigan don't have a lot in common. So I wouldn't take a ton from the policies and the left flank position of Mr. Mamdani as a playbook for Democrats elsewhere.
Why not?
I do think, well, because look, again, Muskegon, Michigan, and Milwaukee and those kind of places are going to look for more moderate, electoral Democrat. And if you look at the polling in Michigan, for example, Haley Stevens, a moderate House member, comes across stronger in every poll that I've seen in that Senate race. That'll be a big deal. The only one beating the Republican challenger there. So I think that's where much of the country still is. But Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey, Abigail Spanberger in Virginia, both moderates as well coming through primaries. But what they share in common with Mamdani is they connected with voters. They are not the old guard. There is a turn-the-page element to their campaigns. And they're all focused on pocketbook issues and prices, just like Trump was. And that will work.
I'm looking at Elise Stefanik, who is probably, maybe, running for governor, as Chris nods along, in New York. And she had a fundraising email out like that last night. And what's going to happen, though, is his side of the aisle is going to try to tie Mamdani to to close to everyone, right? Is that what you guys are going to do?
Let me share a piece of information that you don't know about. We had in January of 2020, so pre-COVID, I'm in the White House. We're looking at the race as it's upcoming, and we thought at that time that Bernie Sanders was going to be the Democrat nominee, okay? And there was reason for that. We had real good data that showed us winning 40 states against Bernie Sanders. Any Republican can beat a progressive in a general election just about anywhere in the world, except maybe New York City and downtown Los Angeles. So yeah, please bring on more of these folks. It does expose a weakness in the Democrat sort of message when you folks just go too far left.
What did you take away from last night?
Well, I think when I've talked to people in the Democratic Party since last night, you're right. They maybe aren't so closely tied to the policy because it doesn't work in other parts of the country. But what they are really talking about is the authenticity that he showed, and he was able to connect with folks and how to bring that part of his campaign into a larger national apparatus. I think we saw a lot of folks struggle with that in November in the Democratic Party. And since then, we've seen large portions of the Democratic Party really trying to plead with their lawmakers, trying to make sure that they feel more represented and that they're doing more to take on Trump. And so trying to take those, the great things that Mondani showed in his election, or at least the primary election, into a larger apparatus. I think that folks are thinking about how to do that when it comes to authenticity. Maybe not so much about the policy.
We know who's leading the Democratic Socialist progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. You want to pick a front runner for the Democratic nomination for 2028, you call it now. You could say that she's the front runner because she's the one that's got the energy in that lane, and the Mamdani victory is another ratification of that. Question is, who else is there, right? Who is the mainstream Democrat? Who is the normie Democrat that is going to put it together? It ain't Gretchen Whitmer. Remember, she held up the things and stood in. Could it maybe be Gavin Newsom? I don't know. He's been trying to clean up and move to the middle.
I thought last night
stuff.
was a bad night for Newsom, no?
How so?
For the reasons that you laid out of AOC sort of being the
well,
next,
no.
You know.
So there's going to be, and I say this affectionately, a cuckoo bananas choice for Democrats, right? The left populist, the left answer to Donald Trump. AOC looks like she's got that. She is nailing it down, and she's got the energy. My point is, who is the normie? Who is the from the moderate part of the Democratic Party?
There are a few, and I'll challenge you, Chris. That's not been the history of the Democratic Party. We've not nominated the left flank person in a national election. We just haven't. We got Joe
Republicans
Biden.
Never nominated the host of a game show until they did.
Yes, but they've always been more further on the conservative end of the base.
You did in '72.
But Andy Beshear, governor of Kentucky, that's a very good normal person who's got a great record running in a red state. I think Democrats are going to want to win in 2028. More than anything else, and the electorate in those primary states is not the electorate of Manhattan.
And that's what happened in 2020, and you're describing exactly what happened in 2020. Was that the cuckoo bananas community said now is our time, we got to do it, and then voters in South Carolina said no, we're not going to act crazy here. And if you look at the vote in New York, if you look at how it went, who were the people who were voting for Cuomo, who was an unappealing candidate for a bunch of reasons, especially for women? Had all of these problems. His voters were black voters. His voters were Hispanic voters. Who was voting for Mamdani were white, younger voters who were the same people that made Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
There's another angle here that I hope we get into. It won't be tonight because it's a longer story for another day, but keep in mind, this was ranked choice voting.
Yes.
I think what's lost on this is they won't really know who won this race until
we know. We know.
No, my point is this. My point is this: is that ranked choice voting is sort of in vogue now. All around the country, everybody wants to look at it. You don't really know who wins with ranked choice voting. That undermines the.
Let me go broader real quick. And we got to run. But for every John Thune in leadership right now, there's a Donald Trump and a Mike Johnson. Right? Yeah. We don't talk about George W. Bush. We don't talk about Mitt Romney. They are quote unquote rhinos in the Republican circles as Mitt nods along. Yeah. Are we looking at a Democratic Party, Jasmine, in a few years from now that sort of mirrors that on the left side when it comes to Bill Clinton, Barack Obama?
I don't No, I don't think so. I mean, I think fundamentally the first step is for Democrats to get on the same page about how to talk about crime, how to talk about the economy, how to talk about those issues that Mondani kind of avoided outside of the economy, and then get on the same page about that, and then talk about how they go forward. I think they need to unite on messaging before we can talk about whether or not what's happening right now is going to be replicated on the left.
I got to run, but yay or nay.
Mikey Sherrill, Abigail Spanberger, moderates came through the primary. This is the exception, not the rule.
We'll leave it there. Thank y'all. Appreciate y'all. Still to come. Other side of the break. Do you think there's anything in common with the NBA draft and the White House?
Body suits. Oh, flagpoles.
Flagpoles.
I'm going to try to draw the connection. Other side of the break. And Elizabeth Vargas reports. Coming up, she will be covering brand new reporting that about threats to President Trump, potentially. That's still to come here on NewsNation. My take, other side. Let's take more of a did you know as someone who loves both sports and politics. I saw a stat that caught my attention. Tonight's the 2025 NBA draft, and the generational talent Cooper Flagg will be the #1 pick, but there's a generational moment expected at #2. Dylan Harper will be selected there, likely. You might remember his dad, Ron Harper, who won 3 NBA titles as Michael Jordan's point guard during the Bulls' run in the 1990s. Now back to that stat that raised my eyebrows. At the turn of the century, 1.6% of NBA players had fathers that also played in the league at one point, but that number has since tripled to 4.9%. So you might be thinking, what does this have anything to do with politics? Well, when it comes to U.S. presidents, 45 have attained the highest office. There have been 2 who can say their dad was one as well. John Quincy Adams, the 6th president of the U.S., son of the 2nd president and the founding father, John Adams. And of course, recently, you've got H.W. Bush and his son, George W. Bush. That means that by 2025, a very familiar number, 4.4% of U.S. presidents were the son of former presidents, just like that 4.9% in the association. Just some numbers for you as we leave tonight. I thank you so much for watching us here on The Hill. We'll be back tomorrow. I'm Blake Burman.